All right, here we are. Hello, everyone. Hello, Melissa. You know, we've
Hello,
been
Nick.
talking for about an hour or so before this recording
Oops.
about some pretty deep spiritual and intellectual things. But yeah, we don't really have a plan today. We're just kind of rolling off the cuff. But before we start rolling off the cuff, just wanted to mention I don't have the website pulled up, but I can pull it up real quick for Young You Organics. Technology. Why is it escaping me? Screen share. Melissa, where's the screen share? I'm like drawing a blank. Is it even here? Oh, there it is.
On the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, on the bottom. Found it. Yeah, Young You Organics, our sponsor, this white sage smudge spray. And they've got much more. A little blog, and you just go right to body and spirit. And I think it's the first one. White sage smudge spray. That way you don't have to have the smell of smoke if you don't like the smell of smoke. And we've covered this before in our other podcast, but just add some pleasant spirits to the space and it's a good way to reset. Anything to add,
And
Melissa?
smells lovely. It smells very refreshing.
It does. I really like the lemongrass in it.
It's very light and airy.
Yeah. And the rosemary too. I think those combinations and the Palo Santo and the sage combined together to, yeah, like you said, just smell really pleasant and good. All right. With that being said, yeah, we didn't really have a plan today. Melissa, what
Yes.
uh what do you want to talk about?
Well, that's really putting me on the spot. We were just talking about separation.
Let's continue to roll with that if you'd
And
like.
where did it come from?
Where did it come from?
I have the question. I want to learn how to ask better questions. I want to understand what it is, like the impetus inside of myself that knows how to ask things, to wonder and to be curious. And then that does lead me to believe like wonder and curiosity, seeing something outside of yourself and wondering how it works, or even seeing something in yourself and wondering like how the hell does that work that way? But I don't know. I mean, questions are a result of the language. Sometimes I wonder if it's like an inherent thing or maybe there's another way.
I think asking questions is an inherent thing. I think that's how we learn really and grow beyond just what our instincts are. Maybe even, ask the question even more so of like what are our instincts, as an animal on this earth, the human animal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because there could be experimentation without language, let's say, like a baby, you know, it could push the cup off the tray and see what happens, off of its. I can't think of what that word is. High chair tray, right? And it falls on the
Yeah.
ground and then it just notices. It might not have the words.
Might not have the words, but I think the idea would still be there. The idea without the words, it's just conveying it into words right now. I mean, it would be what's behind the words of what happens when I knock this thing over. and that's the idea. And so then the baby, goes around and starts to experiment around and like, how does this taste? And like, how does that taste? And starts like munching on the cat's tail or something.
Yeah. So there's like a curi like a thing that's underneath the words.
Yeah, oftentimes my Spanish teacher will teach me to look at what the idea is conveying behind the words itself. That way you can understand what it is that you're using words for.
Yeah, and how do you do that?
Um, you mentally conceptualize what the idea is, like that idea behind the words of what we're talking about, where the baby, whacks the sippy cup off the high chair to see what happens. You do it right now.
I don't have a sippy cup.
Well, right, but it's the idea though without the words. It's thinking without the words.
I guess I just wonder what thinking without words is. Because if they don't have the words,
Yeah, I mean, you can do it. You can totally do it. I mean, thinking without the words is picturing something. Just imagine a red apple. Imagine an orange. That's
yeah, but
thinking.
yeah, but I don't know if a baby has all of that, like that information inside of their head. I think personally that when we don't know what something is, we don't even see it. I've noticed that in my kids. And I think that makes sense according to what I understand about the nervous system. So, like, before we are even conscious of something, our nervous system takes in the information. And if it's something that our nervous system doesn't think is relevant or we don't believe it, it doesn't even take that information in. So, oftentimes, like a baby will have to learn all these words before it could understand what the thing, I mean, they could understand what something, I don't know, understand, but they could have an idea of what something is maybe by like manipulating it, putting it in its mouth. But I don't know if they have like a schema for that thing, like somewhere to store it if they don't already have an idea of what that thing is. It's like, you know, a cat and dog, let's say, or some of the earlier animals that kids will learn. So then they'll think all animals are a cat, a dog, until they actually learn that everything is differentiated out.
Mm, mm. I haven't thought about that, to be honest, with that example of the cat and dog, and just like thinking everything's like one form or another, a cat or a dog. It reminds
Yeah.
me of like the thing you have as a kid where you push that little lever and it like spins around and there's like all bunch of animals on there. It's like the pig goes oink, the
Oh, like a
dog
see
goes
and say.
bark. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that thing.
Yeah, I mean, going and talking about what we were talking about before the podcast started about the idea of separation, it's totally a survival instinct to be able to individuate yourself from your environment. I think though, where we have sort of went astray as a species is thinking though then we're separate from our environment.
Yeah, I
And
mean, at some point you learn that you have to individuate and you have some kind of like a psychic skin. At one point you have a contiguous worldview where you don't know that you are not a separate thing or that you are a separate thing from everything else. And then around, I
yeah,
think, like 6 months of age is like when that starts to happen.
so around 6 months is when you start to individuate and realize that you are your own being
I think
and
so. I
there's an
mean,
environment with
yeah,
other
I don't know
beings.
like the actual complexities of it in terms of, like thinking, but just realizing that you're not in control of everything and that there's like this certain aspect you can control. Like, you know, that's part of like what you're supposed to be learning in that like first year is like how to control your body with gravity. But then right, like learning that I'm a separate thing than my mom, or I'm a separate thing than the bottle, or I'm a separate thing than the sunlight coming in through the window.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, that's really all based on our survival instinct, I think. And I'm sure other animals have it too, to be able to individuate.
I think so, right? Like they have their own territories and they
Yeah,
fight other animals for their territories, or they defend their young or themselves against predators. They realize that's not them.
yeah. Shit, human beings do that too.
Yeah, or I mean, they only eat certain things, maybe, right? Like they don't eat every single thing that exists, so they're like this or that. So they're separating things out into this is edible, this is not.
Yeah. Which, really, it still gets me thinking though of, is the act of separation itself, thinking that you are somehow separate from your environment, is it actually true
Is what actually true?
that you're
That you're
separate
separate
from your
from your environment.
environment?
No, you're a part of the environment. I don't think that like an animal, let's say, for example, even has a thought of it being separate as anything, but there is also that idea of like, I attack this other thing. Not that I'm separate from it, but it is something I attack. It's not me.
Yeah, the
But I
lion
don't
chasing
think
the arrow.
there's the like idea that I'm separate from this thing. But there is an idea of I have to defend myself from this, or I have to attack this, or I'm going to use it as food, or I'm not going to use that thing as food. But it doesn't necessarily make it separate. It just makes it this is something I kill and this is something I play with. Different uses or purposes.
So perhaps then it's just, humanity that thinks it's separate from its environment.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say.
But I think we could say with confidence, though, that that's something in our species, in the collective mind. And I'm not saying everyone thinks this way, but, collectively, there definitely seems to be this cognitive dissonance where, as a species, we think we're somehow separate from the environment. I think that's what causes a lot of pollution.
Thinking that we're separate from the environment.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think just trying to survive causes a lot of pollution. And I mean, let's say, I mean, things already have been set in motion, but let's say like everyone decides that they are, you know, comes into a greater understanding that we're not separate. Like how do you still have humanity I don't know, evolving or changing or growing without having some kind of byproduct like pollution or unintended consequence.
I mean, these are just ideas, but I think that if collectively we started to understand that we are, a species of the earth and our bodies are literally made of it, that if we all kind of came on board to the same idea that, there really is no separation between people other than the concept of it. And yes, we're still individuals, and you're you and I'm me, and everyone else is still everyone else, but we're still, all on this earth together, giving it our best to figure things out. Perhaps, if we all understood that, maybe we would start to treat the earth with some respect and not be polluting it. Maybe if we would understand that, like, that our environment is actually us, and that as a species we do have this power to manipulate the environment. Well, perhaps we could start manipulating the environment for the better and really discover a bunch of cool shit other than just exploit and take from the earth as much as you can and not give anything back.
Yeah, I mean, that's an extremist view for sure, but I agree with what you're saying. I mean, a lot of cool shit has been created. Yeah, of course we can make really cool shit too. I'm just, curious, how does that happen without using like the natural resources
No, I don't think
that
you.
are available?
Well,
And
I don't
maybe
think you can.
limiting the pollution or yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I mean,
it's interesting.
I don't think you can ever stop using the natural resources and still survive. I think though that, if you're using a natural resource and, like, let's say that natural resource uh is somehow you know through the utilization of it really making it so that if we keep using this source of this natural resource, if we keep using this natural resource in the way that we do, like, who knows? I mean, if we just keep burning fossil fuels and displacing that energy that was inside the earth to the atmosphere, how long is it until we just can't even breathe? I mean, if we keep going the way that we're going. And so my point is, if we realize, that we contribute to the environment itself in which we live in, both as an individual and as a collective, that maybe we could more intelligently go about how we use our natural resources. Like, I was thinking about this the other day. Behind me, there is probably, I would say, a 5 mile or more so radius of warehouses, just warehouses almost as far as the eye can see. And I'm thinking, like, I really, really wonder, and maybe we do, I don't know, but I really, really wonder if all of those warehouses, if we need all of them. I'm sure there's probably a portion that we need, but I'm also, inclined to think that humans, there's a lot of greed that goes on, and that we, as a species, like to, you know, extract more than what we can use. And you see it in the economy. There's so much things that we have are that really don't even have a purpose. And I would like to imagine, if all of these warehouses were actually greenhouses, how much healthy food we could be swimming in right now for, a cheap cost. And so my point is, like, I think the way that we, use our land, the way that we work our environment as a species, you see a lot of greed, you see a lot of things that are just, that don't really serve any other purpose besides just taking. And I think that all leads to, this notion of being separate from the environment and being, separate from our species itself.
Yeah, I mean, the notion of separation comes before the taking.
The notion of separation comes from taking. Yeah, I'm on board with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I think there's some like level of scarcity as well that I don't that comes in for people and they feel like, even people that have a lot of resources, I think have a scarcity kind of like consciousness and it's almost maybe like a survival thing for them. Like I have to have all of this.
Yeah, and it's probably also too like once you acquire all of that to then, still be in that scarcity mental framing of then I have to keep all of this because
Yeah.
if I lose it, then I might not be able to go get more of it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I can't say because I'm not those people, but I feel like a lot of people that do have a lot of the resources, right? They aren't that way because of their abundant mindset. It's the belief in, yes, I could earn and generate this much, but also, and the idea that there is this idea of scarcity in terms of the resources. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people are operating under that kind of construct, and you have to really separate yourself, separate yourself from that construct. And then I wonder what happened in terms of, right, the accumulation.
Yeah. Or, I mean, we use the word separation, separating yourself from that construct, or just seeing that it's really just based in an illusion that we live on an earth that, doesn't produce enough resources for us. But I think the opposite of that. I think we do live on an earth and we live in a universe that provides an endless amount of resources for us. It's just a question of how do we tap into it? How do we harness it? And really, how do we live in abundance? I think we can live in an abundance, even with, 9 billion people or however many people are on this earth right now. I firmly think that, if we collectively just started saying, all right, we're not separate from our environment. Let's stop exploiting the environment. Let's stop exploiting the earth. Let's, figure out like what is it that's really necessary for us to live happily and to live healthy. I think we would really start to come to, a lot of common understandings of, okay, what do we need to live happy and healthy? Well, first we need to have clean water. That's, I think, probably number one. Everyone needs clean water. We all need water to live. But even actually, probably before that, we need clean air because without the air, which we're not going to live very long. Like if they're just becomes like a sudden, hole in the atmosphere and it just starts leaking all of this of what we breathe. We're not going to be around very long in this body. So air, we need high quality air, we need high quality water, and we need to have food that's going to be healthy for us, that's not polluted and not, you know, injected with all kinds of whatever or have pesticides put on it and into the soil that really disrupt the natural flow of life and bugs eating things.
I mean, it's interesting you saying all this because I think, like putting chemicals in the water, the like the idea was for people to have clean water, you know, like making genetically modified food, the idea was so that like countries can continue to feed their population, you know? And then all those things have unintended consequences. And sometimes I don't know if it's that there's this, well, yeah, I mean the separation is there, but I think sometimes too, it's possibly just whoever's in charge doing the best they can and not knowing the consequences of all of their actions, right?
Sure,
Like water
sure.
treatment, it was having people having clean water was like a big advancement for our society, or not our society, but like let's say human like life expectancy,
Totally.
you know? So, but all of those things have unintended consequences. And now they're, you know, people discover that, oh, okay, the chemicals in the water cause cancer.
Yeah, I like that point of view because I think that's a really compassionate point of view of just saying like, okay, like these things were put into place perhaps for some good intentions, but we also have to be able to, look at what it's doing and be able to shift from there. I think though
Oh, for
that
sure.
there are people who are have vested interest that go against, all of these things because of going back to what we were talking about with the greed and scarcity. And I'm sure there are a lot of people profiting off of, these things that are affecting our health and the environment itself.
Oh, sure. I mean, I don't deny that, but I think it's helpful to just to also, you know, take an even bigger step back and just look at all the other factors that go into everything.
Yeah, I,
'Cause
I didn't think you were denying anything, but I
yeah,
think
no,
that's
because I agree
important what
with
you're
what you're
saying.
saying. Yeah. Well, you know, it makes me think because Lucas was reading something for school and talking about how they came up with genetically engineered potatoes. And it was because thinking about like a whole, you know, potatoes are one of the main foods that support a lot of people. And if one year all of the potatoes go bad, what do you do? Like, how do the people eat? You know, so here comes science, genetically modified potatoes. That way, if, you know, however many billions or millions or thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands of pounds of potatoes, I don't know what it is, die from fungus, then people still have something to eat. What does it mean if you eat genetically modified potatoes? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean those are the questions I think that we really do need to ask. Like, what happens when we eat that genetically modified food? What happens to our bodies when we eat the food that has pesticides on it? And really, too, what also happens to the earth when we're using all these pesticides? I heard this thing where, like once you start using pesticides and it starts seeping into the ground and, seeping to the point where it's affecting the worms that it could lead to a lot of issues with dry soil. And um, then it showed a video that where there was a field that was an organic field during a really heavy rainstorm where the dirt just stayed and held its position because it was more dense. And then there was the field in which they were using all kinds of pesticides and they weren't rotating their crops, where all of that topsoil just drained away into the river in this heavy storm. And it's just going back to, like we are part of the environment. So how do we best utilize our environment for our health and well-being? I don't know. I think maybe also too what you were saying like with the potatoes, perhaps as a species, it's probably best we don't put all of our eggs in one basket. Mm, I mean, we could eat more than just potatoes, and I'm sure there's a lot more than what we could eat. I heard this thing. It was like it was on a Paul Check video, and it was something like most people eat like the same seven foods their whole life, and the human species can eat like thousands and thousands of things.
Yeah, but it's a matter of like what's cultivated and what they have for sale at your grocery store
Yeah,
or the nearest place you can buy food.
yeah. And even there, I mean, it's limited options. I mean, it's much more than like what we had, you know, 200 years ago, but
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too. Even with hunters and gatherers, like, I mean, how much food did you have access to? It was like maybe there were thousands and thousands of things to choose from, but like what was available in your immediate surroundings?
yeah, right. I mean,
You know,
if you
I don't
go
know
up,
how much that was.
well,
You
sure, or
know.
like, yeah, you go up north where there's, people who are indigenous people that have been living off seal blubber for millennia, and like that's what nourishes their body. Yeah, I don't know. I just think that they're. I was noticing this just like working at a store where I have to deal with a lot of the public. Like you see these statistics all of the time about like how many people are obese in the United States, but like seeing it firsthand and counting and getting an average and like literally seeing it with my own eyes is like really awakening. Like, oh wow, there's a lot of people who are really sick. And I think it definitely comes from, the environment. And I don't just mean like the air we breathe, but the food that we eat. I also think it has something to do with culture and how we educate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you could tease any of it really apart.
Yeah, you can't separate it out.
No, it's all, I mean, everything that has come before is influences what it is now. We're all like you're talking about it, it's not separate, right? You're not separate from your ancestors. And everything they did is a result of what we have now.
Very true. Very true. But
Yeah,
we
so
do
it's
have the
easy
decision
to,
now.
yeah, I mean, well, you do if you know that you do.
Yeah, if you're aware and you're awake to the
Yeah,
decision.
but even having the decision is a really long process, I think, to like doing something about it. I mean, you could be looking at all those people who are obese and you don't know like what decisions they're actually ultimately making. You know, maybe a lot of them have made the decision to do something different.
Maybe. But I
Because there's
also,
a lot you oh sorry to interrupt, but I was just gonna say
okay.
there's a lot because it's not only yourself, but you also have to then like disentangle how we were saying all of the stuff that came before you, we're all a part of it. We're a part of like all of the systems and all of the structures and all of the ideas and ideologies and it things that are kind of like holding everything in place.
I was gonna say, working at a grocery store, that a lot of the people that I see who are obese and very overweight, when I look at their grocery cart, it's usually filled with the shit food. Usually. Sometimes there's a very rare instance where it's not. I would say like 9 times out of 10, it's all pretty much prepackaged food and a lot of sugar. But
Yeah.
it goes to what you were talking about though, as far as, all of the past, is what got us to today. But if we define today only based in the experiences that we've had in the past, then we just recreate all of those same traumas that have happened in the past today. But if we can, harness the understanding that, how we define ourselves today does not have to be out of the past. And we could just, have today be the new day, and we can, look at the choices in which we have today and then decide from those choices really what's going to be better for ourselves.
Oh yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm just kind of stating how nothing could have happened without the way things happened.
No, and it's very
And whatever
true.
that was, not to even make a story. I can't even make a story up out of like what happened, hundreds of thousands of years ago. I can imagine based on things I've read and stuff, but to really know, that's
Yeah.
not for me to know.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you brought this up. So during the last ceremony that we did with the mystery school last Saturday, to preface this, I'm watching this anime and it's called Doctor Stone. And just a real quick kind of what it's about. All of humanity, there's something that happens that turns everyone into stone for about like 3,700 years. And then there's this one person who wakes up and breaks out of the stone and has to start humanity all over again. And he's this scientist dude. And it's like really interesting because during um during one of the mystery school activities, there was a list of questions, and one of the questions was that the current version of the mind is our current version. How did people think in the past? And so I took that question in the ceremony, and I really wanted to explore it based off of like just with what I saw of Dr. Stone, because it's like, I don't know, it's like a cool anime. Highly recommend it. It's so far a 10 out of 10 of just like understanding human ingenuity and like how we went from, you know, our really early ages to, you know, using stones to go hunt animals. And now we are here utilizing the elements to make this computer and plug it in to an electrical source that is shooting out light. And I'm communicating with you right now via this computer. And so, when I took that in the ceremony, and I was just getting these understandings of how the past mind worked. And just one of those things was, how we interacted as far as a community. I mean, it seems like really simple, but like it's the truth that if we lived 150 years ago to have a conversation like this, we would like need to be in a very close-knit community with each other. Like we would need to live close by, and I would need to like see you and like physically say like, "Hey, you want to set up a time where we can like go and talk about such and such?" Or like literally, probably if it was maybe 100 years ago, send you a letter in the mail or something like that. But then, when we look at if when we look at really not even that long ago in our history, people were way more grounded to the natural cycles of the earth. And people were way more grounded to, I think, nature itself 100,000 years ago because we had to be. You had to know a, a lot more about the environment itself than what we do today. And how we communicated with each other was way, way different. And how we got our news was way, way different. And how we organized ourselves was way, way different. I mean, you know, it was little tribes, and then there were, bigger tribes, and then there were sailboats, and we got to travel the world as a species. And, it is just all of like what is creating the current mind. And really, I saw too how the way that we use technology and how it's really influencing uh, our physiology and the shape of our brain
And the body.
and the body and the rest of the body, like the posture and
Yeah, it's bad for your breathing. I mean, it's just bad for your body in general, the hunched over at the computer all the time and
the
lack of
eyes
moving.
and
Yeah, and
lack
then the
of movement,
phones, like looking at the phone all the time.
the tiny little pictures, but like
Yeah.
also too, just like scrolling. and how that, like, as you as you're scrolling, sorry, I'm laughing at myself because I just caught one of my patterns that I've been wanting to work on, saying like, and then but when you're
Good, you know.
when you're scrolling, how that is literally physically affecting how your mind works. Just like
Mm.
next, 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 next.
Yeah, that reminds me. So when Lucas plays on the PlayStation, and you could scroll so fast on that thing, and there's so much information. I'm like, I can't even look at the screen because I can't. My brain like literally cannot process looking at all of that information, like just going. I don't know how his brain does it. I don't think it really. I mean, I don't know. It's probably a different brain. Obviously, we all have different brains, but this is way different than mine. I didn't use technology at his age. There was no such thing. I had one of those TVs where you had to watch what was on. And I didn't have like, there's not even channels anymore.
You know what was a game changer? Was like right around when I turned 17, when you can click guide and it would come up all of the shows. Instead
Oh,
of
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, I know like Nickelodeon is on like 36 and Cartoon Network is on
Yeah.
46 and the news is on 10.
I think there used to be a channel, right? Like you go to like, let's say channel 14, and I feel like it would maybe scroll. I don't know. If you saying that kind of reminds me of something. Or maybe not. Yeah, that's the guide, or maybe it would just go through. I don't know. I remember using
Do,
having a cable box or like an A/B switch. I don't even know what that was. Maybe like A would be like one set of channels and B would be like, 13
yeah.
through 26. And
Do
A was
you
like 1 through 13.
do you remember the TV guide book where you
Oh
would
yeah,
like get
yeah. I
the
used to have the
thing and it
crossword
would,
puzzle on that.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh my God, the
yeah,
TV guide. Yeah,
the
you would need
TV
like an
guide.
encyclopedia now. There's so much TV on.
Yeah, and just like thinking about all of this and how it relates to like how people thought in the past, you know, to get information, you have to go to a library, you have to look, or you'd have to get like an encyclopedia set from the guy who would come
Encyclopedia.
around and
Yeah.
sell it to your door.
Or there used to be the card catalog. I was kind of thinking about that because we were talking about organization. I'm like, maybe I need some kind of card catalog system.
Hey, whatever works. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
if it
I don't know
works.
what works. I'm not sure exactly what works. But I'm curious, did you say what happened in your ceremony?
There was a lot of intentions that I had there. That was only one of them, but it was just the
What's, oh, to explore how
Yeah, that
people
was
used to
one. Yeah, that
communicate.
was one of them. So I was exploring a lot of intentions
Yeah.
simultaneously, but with that one intention, it was just to explore really how our current mind is its current version, and then really how did it look in the past. And so I just
Yeah.
started, like I just thought about how it looked like really long ago, like 200,000 years ago, 300,000 years ago when we were living in communities together and you literally knew everyone in your community, which was a plus and a minus because like if you just didn't fit into your community based off of the ideas of the community, and perhaps that community was going crazy at the time, you could be just excluded from your community, which is a death sentence almost.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, right? And it's not like people were any, I don't know, nicer
No.
necessarily, right? If anything, I think people used to be like way more brutal.
Yeah, I mean, there was still, this notion of separation that permeates humanity. This is really old. This is really old mythology of separation.
Yeah, something that reminds me of is well, kind of what we were talking about at the beginning, like how does a baby communicate where, they don't yet really have that like separation that the language almost gives the brain from the rest of the body. So
Mm-hmm.
you could, and also then there's, just how that happened in general in terms of our history, where thinking really became something to be like prized or valued above the rest of the ways of knowing, which could be more, body based. Not that the brain is separate from the body, but historically, I think there's a separation between those two. Whereas, sometime in the past, it wasn't as separate. So there was also probably that kind of difference in the communication. And then also, right, in terms of how you communicate with the environment around you, because that is a lot of the way, right? Just through those senses.
Yeah. And I mean, people who would, survive off of animal herds, like before we ever even started to herd animals ourselves, there were people who would be hunting these herds of animals, and they would have to, know these animals very deeply and be following them and knowing where they're going to be. And they would have to, also know fish patterns and fish migrations, and they would have to know, you know, tons of plants, and they would have to know cycles of the seasons even more in depth, and when to plant crops. And eventually, you know, all of that is taken care of by a select few people. And now we have, for better or worse, I mean, it has its pros and cons, but the way that we procure food these days, not many people have to know what, an eggplant looks like outside of the thing that you actually eat, or what a pumpkin looks like before that it grows a pumpkin, or when are the fish migrating? When's a good time to go fishing?
Yeah, I mean, the way of life's very different.
It
For
kind of makes
better
me
or
want to
for
go
worse.
back, like in a certain, like go back, but like still have, like, take all of the great aspects of our technological advancements, but still live in a way that is more connected to um, knowing and learning from the environment directly, and fishing and hunting and farming and all of it. And
Yeah,
like
I mean,
living
I'm
in
sure
a
there was a lot of
community.
minuses then too. I try not to in my head kind of glamorize or I don't know if there's another word because it certainly wasn't glamorous. Romanticize, I think that's what I was thinking of. Romanticize how living in the past used to be because I'm sure it was really challenging. Like let's say a lot of your children died very early, and like life expectancy was really, the age was so much lower than it is now.
Yeah, I'm not
Or like
saying
the
like,
mortality rate. Like there's just so many things that we kind of like, it's just so easy to say, like, oh, things were so much better then.
I don't know if I'm saying that. What I'm saying is I want to be able to take all of what we have going on in the current world that's actually good, and harness that and still live in a way that is connected to the natural rhythms of life and the natural rhythms of the earth.
Yeah, well, so that's like your vision for the future
Well, for mine
or how you
personally,
live now.
yeah, well, I see how I live now, and I see, my reliance really on the supply chain. And like, I don't think I'll ever stop relying on the supply chain, but there's also like, I also really want to have, just a piece of land and have some farm animals,
Well, then that's your
and
vision for the future.
yeah, and then just like people working on it so that I can go travel.
I want the land, but I don't want to be on it. I
I
just
want the
want to have
land,
it.
but I don't want to work it. Just you guys go do it.
All of the benefits of the land ownership without having to be on it. in that mystery school ceremony from last week, I had a really big, I don't know if it was like a breakthrough or like an aha, but I did realize that a lot of what I had been working on regarding my trust in not only the medicine, but the spirit really kind of like combusted. And I was like, oh, I really do have so much trust. Or it really is, I really have like worked to create all that.
You realize your trust, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, it just like, psh, it just kind of like exploded inside of me. And I was like, oh, okay, that's what that is.
It sounds like you received the healing, you looking back on maybe certain areas of your life where you just didn't have trust, and now you see it, and you have trust, and you've been healed.
Yeah, I don't know what it was, healing or just like a knowledge or like a, it was like almost like a heart opening and then like a purge. And then also I shared with you I had another ceremony not too long after that one. And I also just had that dieta. So I'm still like in the non-strict part of the dieta. And then I had that other ceremony, right, where a lot of it was really feeling how supported that I actually am and how much I can rely on and lean into and kind of let go and trust that the spirit is doing its part
When you
as I'm
receive,
doing mine.
yeah, as you do, yeah, the co-participatory,
Yeah.
your spirit plus the spirit of everything else. But I wanted to ask you, when you started awakening to that trust, what's changed since then?
What has changed? Just a more reliance on spirit, I suppose. I mean, I had to do a lot of active work to get to that point. I could say, yeah, it happened in a ceremony, but it wasn't just like the ceremonial experience, right? It's intention and actively like doing a meditation with the intention. So I've shared that I was doing those centering prayers and my word. So it's a prayer or a meditation where you focus on God for the most part, and you have a word that kind of brings you back. And so that my word was trust. And I did have this experience where we had that medicine journey together um, in Tennessee, where I part of it for me was, oh, I have this really deep trust in God, but I didn't really at the time because I was sort of around the time where I had to kind of restart my journey and relationship with God. So it was a long time in the making.
I'm
And I
glad though
don't know
that
exactly how that changes things. Sorry about that to
you're good.
interrupt.
You're good. Keep going on that thread. And you
No,
were
I mean,
saying though,
yeah, I don't know exactly how that changes things. I think it's just, partly having the patience and partly having the ability to like to worry less or to
it's
fear
that trust.
less because yeah, there's more of a knowing that that something will work out.
I think it comes from this mythology that we get presented of how God is somehow separate from ourselves and from the rest of the universe, and is this punishing figure where if you do one thing wrong, you're gonna burn in hell forever. And it creates a lot of fear. For me, it's created a lot of fear around God and not trusting life, not trusting the universe, looking at all of the reasons to be scared of it and just being scared shitless to be alive.
Oh yeah, I mean it comes
And
from the way you're raised too. I mean, your parents really don't don't necessarily, especially how we were raised. I mean, it might be different now, but I don't think I think our parents had a lot to do with that too, right? Like having to behave a certain way, and if you didn't behave the way your parents wanted you to,
sure,
we're having
sure.
that fear
So
of like, this is the person that meets my needs, and they're telling me to do this thing, so I better do the thing this way.
yeah, and so it just creates a lot of fear around life itself. But that's what I love, what we're, doing in this medicine journey and this work of being able to look at all of those things and shed those layers of suffering and shed that personal struggle and to understand and to trust how God or source, divinity and spirit really is supporting you and is unfolding everything for your highest good.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think also
There's not really a
too.
punishment there.
Oh no, there never has to be a punishment. I think the punishment comes into play when it's human plus God.
Yeah,
Or
yeah, I think that's humans.
human plus, environment, right? Thinking that like a rainstorm or something is punishing. Or
Yeah,
the flood, the floods or the drought or the locust.
I think Ken Wilber would call that magical thinking.
Well, that was like the state of the consciousness. And the magical is when
That
you
was
have
my,
control over what's happening. Magical is when you think
hmm,
you're doing the stuff. When you think, I said this prayer or I did this dance and I made the rain happen.
I think it goes both ways of like that what you just said and also, oh, I did this one thing wrong and so there was the earthquake.
Hmm, maybe. I don't know about that, but
But I
it
think
makes
what we're talking
sense.
about, I think what we're talking about transcends all of that.
Well, there
What we
really
were
is
talking about
nothing
with the
to be
trust.
punished for. That the trust transcends it.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
couldn't,
but you still have to be kind of like conscious of it. And I mean, there is also such, the thing of having consequences to your actions.
sure, sure,
Like I
the
could blow a stop
consequences.
sign or a red light. It doesn't mean that spirit's gonna make all the cars stop coming. There still is like the consequence of getting into an accident.
Hmm. Perhaps though there really is a divine protector out there that even if you make a mistake, which it's bound to happen, that you're still protected no matter what.
Well, I think it's a matter of, it depends on like what you're defining protected, right? Because you could still like physically die, part of yours living on, and you're still like supported in the field of existence. But
Maybe,
you maybe don't have this human form anymore, so that depends on like how you kind of want to look at it or define it.
perhaps, or maybe like you run the stoplight and spirit's protecting you, and for whatever reason, the car that might have been going through that red light at that moment, a deer runs out in front of that car and that car slams on its brake and stops and doesn't hit the deer, and that prevents you from getting into an accident.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say
It's hard to say.
because then there are also the instances where there is a big accident, or like a 30 car pileup on the interstate. It's just I think there's some things that we'll really never understand. Maybe we're not meant to understand everything.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's that unknowable.
Something else though about the trust that I saw, with the dieta plants, I saw how, because I always do, I still have, I'm I'm trying to move to another story of that, I could communicate adequately, receive and giving and receiving communication with the spirits and with the medicinal plants that I work with. But I saw how, especially when you diet, I'm not exactly sure yet how it works when so you just call on like the spirit of whatever you define it or however you define it. But so the plants that you diet, I saw how, right, like their fractals actually become part of my fractals, and so whenever I'm communicating or doing anything, it's never separate from them anymore. So there's just that, like, right, like there's no doubt anymore with that, like, oh, it's just we're doing it together. Like I can't not be doing it with them because they're a part of me.
Yeah, totally. You cannot not be doing it without them. You're totally infused with all of those plant medicine spirits you got in your body right now.
Yeah.
And like you said, I like that mental image you shared with me about your fractal merging with their fractal. And now that's all your fractal.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, we wonder how you experience this too, but when it comes to communication with the plants, that I've dieted on how I best just go about living, it's really never in words for me. It's always in just inner knowings or visualizing, but the words aren't there. And I find it interesting too, because I mean, plants don't speak words, and it's a language that I mean, it's kind of interesting because I did hear Lester Hamilton say, it's a language that you create with the spirits that you're dieting. And it really is like, a language that you create. And that's how I've been directly experiencing that. It's a language, but it's not a language in words
Yeah. And then I guess that goes back to what we talked about a few times here, that it's not just a
right at the
thought,
beginning.
right? There's other ways of understanding, communicating, getting information, sharing information. Yeah, I tried to do
Yeah.
that on the last ceremony I had to really just go beyond my mind and like what, right, like really trying to be present and guide the experience to have a non-mind experience, to have it like move from just that like everyday blah 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 blah.
Mm. You said that you were reframing things in that you can communicate clearly with the plant medicine spirits themselves and have a clear form of communication, and you were reframing it as that I can have that clear communication. It just reminded me, a friend told me um, yesterday or 2 days ago, and I've heard this saying before, but just hearing a friend actually say it to me, it really sunk in of, you create the words that you're thinking and that you say, and that those words are spelled out, and those are spells that you actually put on yourself. And so,
Mm-hmm.
if you can really harness that aspect of the mind and use that for your benefit. I can clearly communicate
Oh, for
with
sure.
these medicine spirits of the plants that I have dieted. I can positively transform.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
I've noticed it's a really powerful way to use the mind for positive growth and transformation.
Yeah, reorient it to the positive. It takes a lot of work.
Well, it takes a lot of work when you're taught otherwise.
Hmm. Yeah, it's challenging because you have to go through all of the ways in 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 what you're in the ways that you're negative.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what the work that we're currently doing in the mystery school with the mystery school of reprogramming out of self-sabotage. I mean, you know, when you're reprogramming out of self-sabotage, you find all the ways that you self-sabotage. And it, like you said, it takes that awareness of going, okay, I'm gonna do this in another way besides self-sabotage, even when I'm recognizing my self-sabotage. So recognizing the self-sabotage, I'm not gonna self-sabotage myself for being self-sabotaging,
Yeah.
and I'm just gonna move on.
Yeah, I've just been thinking about it as just being like a very firm but loving parent where I'm just not going to let you do this anymore, or I have to stop this right now because it's my responsibility to not let this go any further.
I know what's best for my well-being.
Yeah. Like, of course I do.
This is the direction I'm going in positivity, in
Yeah.
light, and in medicine. Full steam ahead.
Yeah. I'm on board.
We're on board.
Yeah. There's just like no other ride to be on.
Not that I'm interested in.
No, I don't think I would ever be able to stop.
Yeah, once you get a taste of, how to truly transform into a more positive being and live in ways that are more centered and focused on your own well-being. I mean, sure you have the choice to, revert back, but you just keep holding the intention as your guide light of personal transformation and helping self and others and for knowledge and wisdom. And, you focus on that and you experience that. And I'm not going back to the self-sabotaging patterns. I'm just going to keep
No.
realizing them and letting them go until they're all gone. And eventually they're all going to be gone. I don't know how long it's going to take,
Yeah. I guess
but
it
I
doesn't
know that I
really
have the
matter.
willingness. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it takes a whole lifetime. Maybe it might. Hope not. But it might. Uh,
Yeah. Well, with that, I think it's a good place to wrap it up. Thanks. Well, do you have anything additional to add?
no, I don't have anything additional to add. I think that's a good point to stop, to stop at. We're ending the self-sabotaging patterns and behaviors that we've learned, and it's a good place to stop.
All right. Well, so thanks for listening or watching. Let us know what kind of self-sabotage have you been up to recently? Mine is mostly just in my thoughts, honestly, at this point. Yeah, so or leave a comment about anything that you found interesting today, or and like this and share it with a friend. And thank you for watching and listening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.